Well, I came out in my personal life long before I came out in my corporate life. I came out when I was in my 20s, but in my corporate world life, I didn't come out because I was afraid it would be a great disadvantage to me. I was in a man's world, and I thought it would be really harmful and not allow me to get ahead. And I was outed by somebody who happened to see me with another woman. And it was a very difficult time because the word spread, and I was asked directly by colleagues and authority figures and managers, and I was confronted, and I had to come out. And I was very, very scared because it was, my whole career was at stake, and my career was very important to me, and I was on a very good track. And I had made the conscious decision not to come out at work because it wasn't really a very safe time to do that, and I was scared. But there were people, even in the organization, who surprised me, who helped me, and assured me that this was not going to in any way interfere with my progress. But it was a very, very, that was the end of the road. It was a very difficult emotional time getting there. There were people, I was concerned about my image, I was concerned about a lot of things. Hello, I'm Jinny Henenberg. I'm 61 years old and I'm a lesbian, and I've been a member of the CBST community for about 15 years. I wanted to share with you a little bit today my story. When I was a very young woman, I was outed in a work environment where that was not welcome. Fortunately, I found some resources, shoulders I could stand on, shoulders I could lean upon, who helped me through a very difficult time. It also gave me a great perspective on something that my parents used to recite every single Passover. And it's what they would tell the silent child, the child that couldn't ask a question or wouldn't ask a question or was afraid to ask a question. They always told us that what which should be said is, I tell you the story of Passover, of our freedom, of our exodus from Egypt, because of what the Lord did for us when we came out of Egypt. And it's very, very key to remember that there are people, there are resources. And if right now you are feeling difficult, in a difficult place, if anything's on your mind, that you are not alone. There are organizations and rabbis and other religious leaders, teachers, counselors, who will be more than happy to assist you. But what it is you can't be the silent child. You have to ask. Please do not feel apart. You are a part. You sit deep within my heart. Reach out, call, talk, begin the dialogue, and hopefully that will help you. I grew up in a house that my mother kept kosher until my grandfather died. He lived with us. My father was a member of the synagogue, which was a little shul, a little building, and it always resonates with me. Oh, even at the holidays here, the melodies, and I remember as a little girl, the men sat downstairs and the women sat upstairs, and I remember it was a conservative synagogue. As a little girl, I would go, my father would be in on the row, and I could remember going and wanting to sit with him, and the men handing me from one man to another till I got to my father. And I would sit there for a few minutes, and then I'd want to go out, and they hand me back, and then I'd go back upstairs to where my mother and was sitting. And I have more of a secular upbringing. I mean, they didn't go to synagogue every week. But I had a good sense that I was Jewish. I was proud to be Jewish. I grew up in the Bronx in a very mixed neighborhood. So there were Catholics and Protestants and atheists, and but there was a strong Jewish feel, and We were taught, we always celebrated the holidays, and Passover was one of my favorites, one of my mother's favorites, and there was always a lot of discussion at Passover. Not necessarily reading the Haggadah page by page, and but there was a discussion about the questions and the different kinds of children, and what does this simple child, I remember we would talk about it, and the silent child always stayed in my mind. And I think when I was outed, that story really came back, an association that, you can't sit silently, and yes, now that somebody's outed you, and what are you going to do about it? And I went to management right away, I went to human resources right away, I didn't sit silently about it. But I think if I didn't have that Passover story in the back of my mind, I wouldn't have made that connection. And I thought, you can't sit silent. You've sat silent. You've been the silent child, and now you can't sit silent. So, my Jewish upbringing was more about storytelling than it was about the rituals of what we do and how we do it. My mother lit candles, and but those weren't the lessons that we learned. We learned more about what it is to be a people and to live among different kinds of people. I never really came out to them, and my mother died when I was young. Well, I was 32, and my father died when I was 39. So I was out already, but my mother knew because I had a partner, and both my parents knew, but we never discussed it. But they were very welcoming. They were very welcoming. But we never discussed specifically what I was or what the relationship was, but they were very warm towards my father had been married before, and we did not know that family. But many years later, after my parents died, I searched for that family, and I found them. And I found out that I had a half-sister, and she had a daughter, and her daughter was a lesbian. And she didn't tell me at first. She was using the kind of terms that my mother and father used to use. She would say, well, Cindy, that's her daughter's name, my niece's name, has a friend. And I knew she was a grown woman, and I recognized all of this sort of language. And finally one day I said to my sister, is Cindy a lesbian? And she said yes, but I didn't know how we had just met. I didn't know how you feel about these things, and so I didn't want to just come out and say it. I said, well, I'm a lesbian also. And it created such a wonderful bond with a family that I had been estranged from my entire life. Here is something which plagued you, which at one time you thought was going to wreck your life. And here is something that is bridging a gap across your entire family. I started to go to churches because I wanted, after my mother passed away, I wanted a religious community. And I didn't find a lot of synagogues welcoming. I felt that right away they wanted me to become a member, like pay your money, and then maybe we'll comfort you. And I was finding that I could walk into any church, anywhere. And I wound up going to Riverside Church for a while and meeting people. But then I felt it wasn't my culture, it wasn't my identity. And I thought there has to be, this is New York City, someplace. And I just started to research it, and I found CBST. And I started to come here, and it was small, it was on a Friday night, and I remember that nobody talked to me. And then Joe was sitting in front of me, and he turned around, and he said hello, and I said hello, and we chatted, and I wasn't going to go back the next week. And I thought, but that guy was there, and he was kind of nice, and I went back. And I just kept coming and coming and coming, and then slowly but surely, I got to know people, and I realized that I had to bring all of these pieces together. I had to bring together being Jewish. I had to bring together being a lesbian. I had to bring together, my culture, not just my religion, and when I've been talking about my culture, the music, that I had to bring these things together, that they were too splintered, and that, you know, here was a place, and I had my doubts, that had the potential to help me bring it all together, to meet people, to also socialize. You know, having been in the corporation for so long, I had a part of me that was secret. And I just didn't want that anymore. I didn't want it to be secret. And I thought, this synagogue is a place that maybe can help me be out of the closet on every level. And that was very important to me.